Welcome back to Mom Nation Unscripted. Now, a word from our sponsor.
Hi, I am Kelly with Olardi, and it is our mission to get toxin-free products into every home and more money into more people's pockets. 8 years ago, we were moms who couldn't stop sharing education on real food, gut health, and fermenting. Over the years, we started paying attention to not only what we put in our bodies, but also what we put on our bodies. Now, as movement makers, we are on a mission to show you how you and your family can live a toxin-free lifestyle. Follow us on Instagram at kelly.liston and at Tamara Manley, and email us at olardiblog@gmail.com to connect.
Woo! Welcome to season 2, episode 10 of Mom Nation Unscripted. And we are the podcast that is totally unscripted, talking to you about mom topics.
Yeah.
So, hey, Katie.
Hey, I can't believe it's episode 10 already.
I know. It feels like it's been forever because of quarantine. But it doesn't feel like it's been forever that we've been here talking. It doesn't feel like we've had 10 conversations like this.
It's so true. It really doesn't. And I think I have that aha in every single episode. So I apologize if I do. But I can't believe every single episode is one more.
I know. Well, it's just like we get to come on here and talk with our friends. And it's awesome.
It's fun.
I love it.
This works for me.
It does. It does. So, today's episode is going to be really interesting since we're going to be talking about, a mother's love, advocating for your child, what to do when you come up against walls where medically you're being told one thing, but what's happening is something completely different. So it's going to be kind of a different episode than we've been doing in the past leading up to now. So anyway.
I'm excited for it. I really am.
Me too. I think it's going to be one of those meaningful ones that not necessarily everybody will listen to it today, but it's going to be one that when a mom listens to it 4 years from now and she needs some encouragement to advocate for her child, she's going to have some resources to do that. So I'm excited.
And a little bit of inspiration.
Yeah.
I have a feeling we may talk about it. We'll see what our guest Cami says when we introduce her and when she starts to tell her story. But I have a feeling we might talk about women's intuition or mother's intuition rather.
Mm-hmm.
Because I personally feel like that's really huge,
I do too. So before we get into that though, let's start by telling everybody what they need to do. Katie, do you want to tell them this week? What do you guys need to do?
I do. We are really, really excited about this podcast. And in order to get it in the homes and ears of more and more listeners, we need a little bit of help from you guys. Please help us out. If you love us, and even if you don't, just wait a minute, you will. Go to iTunes, subscribe, rate us. Just a 5-star rating will be fine. And what else do we want? Reviews, yes.
Yes.
Rating, review, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And while you're at it, while you're just on this Mom Nation, helping us out train, you can go Mom Nation USA on Instagram, and you can follow us on Facebook so that you can actually stay up to date every week as we have these come out live. So
yes, we're really trying to grow this audience, Beth. I mean, obviously we feel like we have really good topics and it's, things that moms can plug into and we really like sharing that. But we kind of have a bit of a bigger
agenda.
Yeah.
We have an agenda. Yeah, for sure. So we have, as people that are so in touch with so many moms, we have talked to so many moms that they are in situations where they either need to get out of a relationship or they're in a very not good place, right? Let's just call it like it is. They're not in a good place. And these women kind of need a hand in order to be able to transition their lives into a healthier, happier way of living. And so we actually have a dream of creating communes for moms in every major city across the United States. And these communes are designed to be a home for moms, literally. A home for moms that they are in a transition period and they just need somewhere to stay for 3 months without having to stress about rent, without having to stress about bills, without having to stress about everything as they get their feet back under themselves and as they get just some things in place so that they can take care of themselves and their kids as they transition. Now, a lot of times this might look like a divorce. A lot of times this might look like a separation from a partner, but there are times when a mom might tragically lose her partner. And this is a home for moms in that situation as well. So there's just so many different moms who they need this. Katie and myself and Jenny and Sherry and Katie are the owners of Mom Nation. They've all been through divorces, and they've come from families and situations where they've experienced what it's like to have moms that could have used this type of a support system. And so that is our big, crazy, selfish agenda. I'm just kidding. It's definitely not selfish, but that's why we're doing this. That's why we keep showing up week after week, is because we know that there are moms who need us to show up, not just for like the mental and emotional support of this podcast, but to help to reach more and more people so that we are going to be able to build these homes for moms.
Right.
So,
and until that day, because that's, we have a few things that we have to put in place before that comes about.
Just a few.
Until that day, we do, and we have compiled over the last several years, resources and different things that moms can plug into. So if you're finding yourself in that situation where the mom units are not quite built yet, we do have resources that we can offer to you, free of charge as far as we're concerned. I don't know what those resources would charge you depending on the different ones, but for us, the information is something that we could just give to you. So.
Absolutely. So, yeah. But that being said, I kind of want to hear about your week this past week, Katie. I don't know that much will have changed since we're all in quarantine still, but go ahead.
Not so much, really. So over the weekend, we took a little road trip, and I wish I could remember it. I bet I could find it in my phone though, because I took a picture of the name of it. But there was this really cool campground right in the side of a mountain. Beautiful, beautiful campground between here and Tucson-ish. That's about all I got. Because when I don't drive, I don't pay attention to where we're going.
I don't either. Oh my gosh, that's me.
Right?
We cannot road trip just the two of us, clearly.
We could not.
We would be in trouble.
We get there and I'm like, where are we? And my husband's like, weren't you here the whole time?
No.
So I found this great new potential campground. So Jenny Cohen, we're going camping. It was beautiful. We had fun. We brought little lawn chairs, little lunch, and a beer, and sat around as a family and played some Frisbee and had a little bit of fun. So that was cool. And then all I can think about is what happened after that. And that happened yesterday. And my computer crashed. And I'm just like, me, right? No computer. That's like, I don't know.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a big deal. Oh my gosh.
From my house to your house without a car.
Right. Well, dang. But you are getting a new computer, you were telling me.
Yeah, so I looked at
getting?
thing called a Mac Mini. I don't know if you've heard about those. I hadn't, since my husband just kind of mentioned it to me yesterday, and he's like, well, I think you can still use your same monitor and your keyboard and stuff and just get this new innards. So the innards are on their way, and I'm hoping that it all works like it's supposed to, and I'm not doing this hodgepodge all the rest of the electronics in my house, for the next week. So
yeah, that's intense. That is intense.
That's crazy. How about you?
Okay, so you guys might judge me, but oh well, here we are anyway. So I have been having the quarantine grumps, to say the least, and I'm pretty over it. Like, I am so freaking over it. And so my husband, he was seeing me like go down this like really angry rabbit hole, and he ended up just telling me, hey, I know you've always wanted to go to Bisbee. I just booked us a hotel for this night. And so on Saturday we went to Bisbee and we stayed in a hotel. Now nothing is open, but we got to get out of town. And so we actually stayed in the Bisbee Grand Hotel, I think is what it's called. And so if you're not familiar with Bisbee, it is a city or a town down here in Arizona. It's right on the border of Mexico. And it's built like into this like super tight valley mountains. All of the houses are like cut out into the sides of the mountain, basically. And it was an old mining town, and it's supposed to be super haunted.
I was going to say, did the ghost come and visit you?
Okay, so I was so freaked out because I like Google it because I'm like, are we staying at a haunted hotel? We were indeed. But the ghosts at this hotel are apparently just like super chill. They'll like move your towels and they'll mess with you that way.
Chill ghosts.
Yes. They're not like mean, creep you out ghosts. But I left my kids' room to go to the room that my husband and I were staying in. And we go, I'm like walking out of their room, and of course their room is like totally crazy. So they're staying in like a covered wagon with a bed in the bed of the covered wagon. And so I'm like walking out of the room and I'm like, don't see a ghost, don't see a ghost, don't see a ghost. Like, do not see a ghost. And my daughter pops her head out from under the covered wagon cover. And I about had a heart attack. And I just like went back to my own room and just wanted to cry because it scared me so bad. I did not see a ghost, but man, it might have not even been as scary if I did, because I was just so worried about seeing a ghost this whole, one night that we were there. But I loved Bisbee. Oh my gosh. I cannot wait to go back when things are open.
Yes, when things are open. I'm so glad you were able to get away, though. I bet that was nice. Like, just different scenery for even a day,
Yeah. Well, and like, what I thought about is that, like, everybody, I'm not saying that we shouldn't stay home. I'm not saying that a lot of things shouldn't be shut. I am a fan of schools being shut down right now, personally. And I sat there and like we weighed out the risks versus the benefits of staying home versus going somewhere. And it was worth the risk. Like, it was worth going somewhere for my mental health. And so anyway, that actually feeds perfectly into what we're going to be talking about today. Nice. We're going to be talking about benefits versus risk, and making really good decisions. So hi, Cami.
Hi, ladies.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today. I really am honored that you asked me to join you.
Yes, I'm really excited for this conversation. So, Katie, you know Cami better than I do. Do we want to have her introduce herself, or do you want to introduce her?
Let's have her introduce herself.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Cami.
Well, I'm a mom of 3 and a half. I have a stepson that's actually a freshman at U of A this year. So, so an interesting freshman year for him. But my other 3 are 10, 8. Well, one's going to be 8 tomorrow, and 6. So my story is mainly about my 10-year-old, but it impacted the entire family. So it wasn't just him. It's been a couple years of a journey, but basically began when he was 5 years old, and he was so ill. Anything for him to be a happy, healthy kid again. He was coughing all night due to uncontrolled allergies and asthma. We had to keep him indoors all the time because when he went outside, he would just have trouble breathing. He was basically allergic to everything outside. When we took him to the allergist, his back lit up like a Christmas tree and he just screamed. I mean, and the allergist was like, he needs a mask when he's outside. No animals at all. He can't touch grass. We tried everything holistic. We did diet, vitamins, rubbed oils up and down his spine, put him in the shower to breathe. And there was just nothing I could do. He ended up with pneumonia, high fever. Why? This is him when he was really sick, and ruptured eardrums due to uncontrolled allergies and asthma. And they basically told me he was going to be in the ER if we didn't put him on a medication to control it. So I, as a frightened and freaked out parent, I did what they recommended. Because basically they said you're going to have to walk around with an EpiPen all the time. So we put him on this tasty, popular pink chewable pill called Montelukast, and that's a generic name for a singular. His older brother was on it for years. So we thought it was fine, and it helped his asthma. So I almost kind of was fine with it, The doctor never said anything to us, just we put him on this medication. And within several weeks, he was much, much better. He could go outside, he could play baseball. He was a normal and healthy kid. No more breathing treatments every few hours, rescue inhalers. I wasn't outside his door all night listening to see if he could breathe. And he could be a kid again. I was actually happy at this point in our life. Even though I don't like pharmaceuticals, at this point, I thought it was a miracle medication. And as time passed, I became accustomed to picking up the prescription every month. The pharmacist would ask any questions, but if I didn't know what to ask, how would I ask? The bottle, in which I still have, it says, chew and swallow one mouth every night at bedtime. That's it. And so we kept going through. Slow time though, he started getting sad, and he didn't do things that used to make him happy. He stopped wanting to run and play. When I looked in his eyes, there was just emptiness. And I don't know how to describe that other than as parents know when we see our kids are sad. And I noticed facial and full body tics, that's what was alarming to me. I think the other things came on slowly, and you can kind of shrug them off. But when you see something physical happen, that's when you're like, okay, something's going on. He started being just short fused. He had emotional outbursts, irrational behavior, started becoming frequent. He'd go into these tantruming loops, like before bed, before school refusal. He would freak out over small things, like what color cup he had. He was 7 years old. And so this is toddler type behavior.
Right.
We lived in constant distress, like walking on eggshells. We never knew what would set him off. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that with somebody, and you just want to make sure, you just try to avoid everything, right? We figured out, thought his triggers were, and he never had trouble at school before. I mean, he was a star student, and teachers started emailing me daily about his behavior, which was not him. I felt a victory. I could even get him in school without screaming. He would scream right before. We ended up to have the school psychologist come to the car and help him get inside the school because he would just scream. From top of his class education, he would melt down in the middle of class if something schedule changed. If he didn't like the way the paper they gave him in class looked. It would manage him. He would talk without raising his hand. He would interrupt the teacher. He would fidget nonstop, get out of his chair, walk around the room. And my biggest concern, though, was really how sad he was all the time. I didn't know what to do. And I felt like I was failing as a parent. And he was just unable to communicate with me. At one point, we just wrote letters under the door to each other. That seemed like he was able to talk to me that way. I was trying as hard as I could to figure out how to talk to him. I even would talk to him through puppets. I read every single parenting book, and it seemed like every technique was making him worse. So I needed help. It was beyond what my scope was. I had no training in this. So I booked a full-fledged neuropsychological exam to figure out what was going on. And he was given several clinical diagnoses. One was ADHD, which just didn't seem like him. At 7 years old, I knew him from the start, and he was always mellow and just chill. That was the comments I'd get from people, like, you have such a chill boy, But, I wanted to help him. So I just accepted it, and I was ready to move on to the next step in helping him. But it was haunting me. Like, what the heck was going on with him? This wasn't him. It was like someone came and snatched the happy boy I knew. And I couldn't find answers that made sense. And I didn't stop searching. And the doctors that we saw, I kept taking him doctor to doctor, and they all blamed it on his school change, his environment, his age. I'm like, but what about these tics? Like, how does that happen? And they'd be like, oh, just sometimes it happens when you're 7. But none of those explanations. Yeah, I know. None of those explanations make sense. I had written down his medication he was on, every single eval, and nothing they said I agreed with, but like I said, I just wanted to get an IEP at school so we could have assistance at school. So I didn't stop researching, and I reached out to an asthma support group on Facebook because I'm like, gosh, now he's got a couple things going on, how do you manage both these conditions? And when I said what's going on with my son in an asthma group, I found a thread from a mom in Australia talking about the effects of Singulair, montelukast, and the article title alone was what I needed. It was my aha moment. That was it. I knew that was it. And I actually was a little relieved to find out it was a medication. I'm like, awesome, just stop the medication and he'll be better. Easy enough, and there was also this support group for the medicine. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's 5,000 people that have had adverse reaction to this. What's going on? And both of his doctors, his pediatrician and allergist, both were like, stop that. Those are the side effects. Stop the medication. So we did. But the side effect group was telling me, you need to sleep. He's been on it several years. He's having neuropsychological side effects. It might shock Eddie. But I was listening to the doctors. And actually at that point, I was kind of like nauseous giving it to him anymore. I'm like, ugh, So we just stopped giving it to him. And after we stopped the medication, some things did seem to improve. It was like this dark cloud was lifted. I could see him back, like the twinkle in his eye came back. And this is a picture of him just a few days after we stopped giving it to him. You could see he's there. Some of the pictures from times, I can't even get it anymore. I mean, he's just, it's sad. Like you can see he's just sad in every picture. And that was the first I saw his dimple come back. We hadn't seen his dimple for like a year. Other things, and he started having her nightmares in our room, screaming, and the vivid descriptions he'd give us were like, there's no way this kid ever got those ideas in his mind. And they scared us adults. His rages were inconsolable. I mean, he had awful anxiety. He thought people were laughing at him. I mean, I was at the school. I would volunteer at the school just to make sure and keep track of him. I know the teachers knew what was going on and were looking out for him. And by the way, his school was so supportive during this. They were fantastic. I couldn't have asked for more support. They were amazing. And I think when you go through something like this, you just need to be honest. And I made appointments with them. I was telling them what was going on. They'd come volunteer at lunch. And so, but anyways, he thought people were laughing at him. And I was like, there's no one laughing at you, buddy. And for weeks, we didn't know if we needed to check into an inpatient hospital. The group told me like, look, just give it time. Don't go in there. They're going to put him on all these other drugs and make it worse. And at one point we buckled him in his car seat in the garage and just sat because we didn't want him hurting himself or anyone else. I mean, we didn't know what to do with him. He was just screaming, raging. It's like he wanted to get out of his own skin, and his hyperactivity in school worsened. The teachers were like, I thought you stopped the medication, but he was going through withdrawals. We didn't know he was going through withdrawals, and that's what it was. He was sensitive to touch. He developed an extreme auditory sensitivity, like he could hear a clock ticking 2 rooms over, and that's what was setting him off at school. And when I took him to the doctor, he could barely get through the point. He would just scream the entire time. And the doctor just was like, oh, I think he has ODD, like oppositional defiant disorder. I'm like, this isn't ODD. This is drug-induced academia. Like when you stop taking an antidepressant abruptly, your body's like, like flu type symptoms. I mean, his stomach was, he was cleaning his stomach. I mean, it was just frustrating. One was saying to me, but that did help. I want to use caution here. Like, you do want to talk to your medical things, but know your gut. and kind of listen to everything, listening to all these doctors. I was listening to people who've been through this. I, kind of was taking what I thought was best to help him. And so there were awful things that happened during months coming off that I can't even discuss. He's 10 and I want to help his privacy here. But just know it was like a movie, and the family suffered. And it was this heightened amount of behavior continued until we quickly intervened. And I'm afraid if we didn't do anything, he would still be in that state. I mean, it's been 2 years, but time is what we've seen in the group it helps the most. But we realized that he had a chemical sensitivity he developed from the medication. I don't know what it did to his body, but now he's sensitive to any type of ingredients that are remotely similar to it. There's some ads that they use, like mannitol, sorbitol, things like that, to just inactive ingredients to mix with. And we found that a lot of foods have those in it, a lot of like supplements. So people tell you, oh, try this vitamin. I'd give it to you, would like relapse. And we found that we have to be careful with all those things. But luckily the group told me about that. And they said, you got to be careful what you give him. And so he's had severe psychosis from Claritin, glutathione, which is a vitamin B vitamins, additives, preservatives, MSG, over-the-counter medications. And later I found this to be called mast activation disease. And to make your head spin, Montelukast is the main treatment of this disease, even though it caused the disease in my son. So if you go to a doctor for this disease, the treatment for it, but it caused it. Oh, I can't even understand it. So anyways, we've thrown everything under the sun at this problem to get him better. And slowly through time and treat, he's come to us. And I'll show you pictures just to highlight. This was about 4 or 5 months after we stopped giving him Singular. Your brain's not supposed to be read there. This is called a key. It's a brain map. It's like heightened free. And then this is the ADHD. His brain just wouldn't stop. You're not supposed to read like that. I would remember, I can't touch, my brain won't shut off. And he would even bash his head just for his brain to, and like you can see looking at those maps, what was going on. So we did 80 sessions of neurofeedback. It's when, it's kind of an alternative treatment for ADHD where they have you watch a video and you control it with your mind, turning it off and on. And I don't know about it, but then it freaking worked. It brought him back to us. And it was pricey and time consuming, and it took a year, but it brought him back to us. And he's lost the ADHD diagnosis. And he also did some light and sound therapy to get rid of that auditory sensitivity. So now you could have the music blaring and he won't freak out. And we found the pitch of his sister's voices were what the area that was bugging him the most. And he sensitized that. And so he's fine with them talking. Before them just even talking was a trigger. And I didn't know any of this until we did all this testing later found. That was why, and I want to say, if your kids are try to figure out why, right? Shut down the lights. It might be the lights in the room. They might be too much, or just give up. And we've done infrared light therapy, hyperbaric oxygen treatments. We even bought a tank here, neurotransmitter testing. So neurotransmitter testing is interesting, right? Because if you go to a psychiatrist, they'll try to put you on an SSRI, and they don't test you though to see where your neurotransmitters before. What if your serotonin level was too high? And that's what Tyson's was. It was too. So if they had prescribed an antidepressant, he could have gotten Serra syndrome because his serotonin was already way too high. Now, I don't know why they aren't concerned with other neurotransmitters and why they don't have treatments for those. And my son was lots of them. And so this functional doctor, she's actually helped a lot of people in the support group. She put him on several different supplements that didn't have those additives in them, thank goodness. And those brought his happiness back. I saw him just happy all the time, smiling. So those helped. It was basically like a mesh of different things. And then a year after, a friend actually in Mommy strongly encouraged me to see this integrative neurologist. And she found him to have a immune system dysfunction. Basically, he has strep, and he can't get rid of the strep in his body, and it's attacking an area in his brain, the basal ganglia, I guess it's called. And so she thinks, and the immunologist that we see thinks that this basically what ignited the fire in the body and caused his immune system to just go haywire. And so he does need IVIG. It's an immunoglobulin therapy. It's from Donate Plasma, and our insurance has denied it 3 times. We've looked 3 times, and now the doctor that he sees can't do anything more. We're trying to see if another doctor will order it. So that's where we are with that. And it's called, this type of immune system dysfunction is called PANS. A lot of children in the support group have come down with this condition. We also recently found out he has heart involvement, just as secondary to his body fighting so hard. Prior to this medication, he was just a kid with horrible allergies. And I can't blame it on everything, but it really, I don't know. It's been 5 years since he took it, so I don't know what would have happened to him, but I don't think this would have. But even though he faces long-term medical issues, he's much better mentally. I mean, there's no comparison. He's not that person. I mean, his teachers say he's a different child. No more trouble at school, like back to being himself. But the PTSD for me is still there. He doesn't remember any of this at all. I still hear the screaming in my nightmares. I'm holding my baby, scared of his own shadow. And I can't get those years back. Those precious years of not only him, but his sisters who were tormented. And during this crisis, I became an admin for the support group because it helped me, being with other people going through it. And I couldn't sleep at night knowing this was happening to other children, and they didn't know why. The parents had no clue. And they didn't know this medication was a culprit. And it'd be so sick to think that this is probably going on 2.5 million children singular in just the U.S. a year. And I've virtually helped with thousands of parents tormented by this medication. And before I joined, the admin team sent a letter to the FDA voicing their concerns about these side effects back in 2017. And 2 years later, all of 2019, the FDA decided to have a pediatric safety review meeting. And we realized this was our chance to be heard. And I flew out to the meeting and I spoke on behalf of the thousands of families in the group. And you can find our show on YouTube. And several other parents spoke as well. Several other parents who lost their children to this medication spoke. And just this past month, March 4th, all of our hard work and advocacy, it paid off. They black box warning on the medication. They even indicated that side effects can happen at any time during use. They can start after stopping, worsen. And they recognize withdrawal, and that for most people, the benefits do not weigh the risks. And they took allergic rhinitis for the prescription off. Some doctors are even mailing letters to their patients discouraging use. But we find that many providers still are downplaying the side effects, even after this. And so there's a lot of work still to be done. Also, the FDA did not articulate the safest way of discontinuing the medication. We still think as a community that have been through it that tapering is probably a better avenue if someone's been on it a long time, but this isn't indicated in the guidance. And we are not doctors in the group, so we can't medically advise people. We can just share our experience. although steps in the right direction have been made, there's still a lot of work to be done. And that's why I'm here today. And if this just helps one person, or if one of you shares this to someone you know on the medication, then it would be worth it. And I just want to leave our moms with this, that the FDA review meeting in September happened if the other admins did not send a letter of concern to them in 2017. This medication might have been over the counter if they didn't speak up at the meeting in 2014.
Oh my.
If many of the families didn't submit a statement of what happened to them this fall, nothing would have happened. That is so scary. If that we didn't step up, nothing would have changed. And they knew about these reported side effects for years. And it took patience and perseverance from us for happen. I mean, I can't take credit because I've only been with a group 2 years. I mean, some of these parents have been advocating since 2008. But us impacted families were not going away, moving up. And I just want you to think about something you know that is wrong, that continues, and to start now. Start writing letters, start joining forces with others, and start doing all you can for whatever is in your heart. You can make a difference, and trust your gut and know your. If something isn't right, search for answers. Don't. All right, and that's what I leave you for today.
What an incredible story. Oh my gosh. So much came to me during that time. And I mean, my heart goes out to you and your family. And I knew you were going through some things, you know, because I've known you for a few years, but didn't realize to what degree. And my heart does go out to you. I mean, it's just a couple of things that you said really stick out to me big time. One, speaking up. Just speaking up and speaking, you know, your truth and what's in your heart. And those people with that group that you found did that. And how thankful are we all that they did that and you were able to stumble upon that. If they didn't speak up, where could you be right now? You know, I mean, finding that for you, I'm sure, I mean, it sounds like it was really the catalyst to the change and had to have been huge for you.
Yeah, it was healing for me personally to meet everybody I've been talking to online for years and to give them hugs and to hear their stories. And it was amazing experience. And a lot of people who didn't speak came to the meeting. I have a friend that came from here that flew out to be there for me. Her son took the medication too. And but yeah, it's scary that, you know, there might be other things on the market that are this bad. I know several other things. I'm actually in their groups to try to help. And there's some over-the-counter medications that are pretty bad too, that cause similar side effects. And we just want informed consent.
Yeah.
You know, we as parents, we deserve it for the doctor just to say, hey, this can happen.
Right.
That's all we want. We're not saying take it off the shelves. We realize there's a use for it still. There's some people who have life-threatening asthma and still need something and they don't have medications. But we're not and I think that's important for people to know too. If you're fighting for something, you need to be balanced. You can't just be extreme because people won't listen to you. And we're a balanced group of people, and we want to make sure that that we're heard. So, but yeah, that meeting, you should have seen the doctors. I mean, you can actually watch it online. It's on the FDA website, and they were like, you know, some doctors cried. There was one who she had her 2 kids on it just for runny noses, and she was mortified. And I think that's what did it. Just our stories. And there's all lots of scientific evidence now. There's tons of research. And that's what's frustrating is this knowledge has been around for a long time. They just waited to do it. And
that's one of the interesting things is that, like, when you think about everybody who will dismiss stories when it comes to medications or whatever, they say, well, their scientific evidence says, well, we have to give time for scientific evidence, because it
Right.
can compile over time and actually lead to a different answer than we initially thought. I last year was diagnosed with a seizure disorder, and the seizure disorder was a direct result of an antidepressant I was on. And I had asked my doctor and asked 2 different other doctors who came in the room at various points when I kept going to the doctor and being like, guys, something's not right. Something's not right. And they all were like, nope, this wouldn't be your medication. This wouldn't be your medication. And this isn't seizures are not a side effect of Lexapro. And then I ended up getting an MRI. I ended up going to a neurologist for a few months. And the neurologist put me on an anti-seizure medication, which worked for stopping seizures. But literally within like minutes after I would take the medication, I would get blinding migraines within minutes. And the neurologist told me, no, that wouldn't be from the medication. And you just must have a migraine disorder as well. And that's when I was just like, all right, I'm done. And I ended up transferring my care to a naturopath. And during my very, very first appointment with her, she looks up my medication and she goes, you know that seizures are a side effect of your antidepressant, right?
What?
Yeah.
Said, nope. Nope. And I still have neurological tics, and I still have small seizures now. I've been off it for, I want to say it's been a year maybe now, or no, it wouldn't have been a year. Maybe it's been 6 to 8 months or so that I've been off of it, but I still have neurological damage from what happened from the medication.
Oh my goodness.
And so like,
sorry.
Thanks. I'd gone on this medication to deal with panic attacks from OCD, and depression and anxiety and that sort of thing. And so I don't regret going on an antidepressant. Yeah. I do wish that when I went in and I said, guys, I'm waking up and like my back is arching and my hands shaking and like I will start nodding. My body, I would just start nodding and I couldn't stop. And I would just tell them like all of this stuff is happening, and they'd say, not the medication, must be something wrong with you, right?
Oh my gosh.
And so then I wean off of the medication and it's basically gone. Like I said, I do still have some lingering things, but I can say with confidence, it was the Lexapro. And there is a Facebook group of people who have seizures from Lexapro. And so it's very much the same story that you're talking about. And I just like, I went there and I was like, oh, I guess I'm not crazy. And I left the group after that, like once I got my validation. But what you're saying about like, you have to share the story in order for other people to be saved. That's huge. That's huge.
Well, we find most people leave after they're better. The group. I mean, when we went to have the petition signed, we had a black box petition and we had to dig for people. I mean, because they left the group, they weren't active anymore. And I understand it, especially if you have a mental, disorder, it's painful to stay, read people's stories. And I mean, I actually had really bad nightmares the other night just from thinking about talking about this. I woke up sweating and, freaking out. And it's a horrible time that I thinking about what happened to Tyson. And in some days I need to take a breath, especially after that black box warning. We had so many members come in just were in this. It's hard. And you have to take breaks. You have to know when to stop. It can go on. I mean, it's a worldly group. So there's people, mornings I wake up and there's 50 messages, like people freaking out in Australia. And I'm like, so you really need to be careful. So I understand why people leave. But I couldn't sleep knowing there was children. And that's what's hard. We get adults that join the group too. And when they articulate how they felt on that medication, it makes me even more sad for the children articulate how they feel. Tyson, tell me. even saw him when he was 7. I mean, we have toddlers on the medication, just screaming, raging. And the parents are like, is this terrible twos? And the doctor tells them, oh yeah, that's normal for your age. And these are not normal tantrums. These are demonic, just will go on for hours over nothing. And you find with a medication induced type thing like that, time is the best healing. You know, people coming off want an easy button, get better. And I try to tell them, just, you gotta just let it come out of you, you know, maybe go to the sauna, sweat it out, but trying to fit with other antidepressants or trying to, you know, take all these supplements, you're going to react to them. You don't know what it is. We tried doing stuff like that when we first came off, and it just made them worse. And yeah, like you, at that time, even more time that passes, you're just going to slowly out. And I hope you fully, it's really hard to recover from this. And even at the meeting where scientists saying it impacts the GR17 receptor in the brain, GRP17 receptor. And we don't know how to fix that. I don't know if it's permanent or what, but hopefully more research will be done. And adults, there's a lot of adults in the group too that took it for a long time. And we even have people who took it for just a few weeks that have long-term issues. So
yeah,
sorry it happened to you.
Thanks. Yeah, when I had my MRI, there's actually the hippocampus, this section in the brain that they found that when people have seizures, it damages the hippocampus. And so my hippocampus is now asymmetrical, where the left side is in the 77th percentile and the right side is in the 22nd percentile. And it's like, okay, I was dealing with these seizures, you know, nearly every day for like a year, and nobody would listen. Nobody would listen. And is my brain permanently damaged because of that? And it's crazy making, right? Like you just, and I think that that's also part of maybe why people walk away and they don't share, you know, their stories. It's like, okay, I had this happen. Nobody listened to me. Nobody's going to listen now. And why would I go out there and why would I keep sharing my story when people just keep telling me I'm crazy?
Oh, I've had so many people tell me I'm crazy. Doctors, other moms, and I'm in several just asthma groups, and I try to be, you know, careful to warn people in a nice way, you know, and we've had people call us like, you know, anti-Montelukast, like anti-vaxxer, you know, type of people. And like I said, we're not extremists. And I try to be nice by warning, like, hey, I'm not sure if you're aware. But it's because people complain, oh, I'm having nightmares. And I'll say, those are reported side effects. And once, you know, you might want to talk to your doctor. And it's hard to not want to like, you just blow up and be like, stop taking it, you know, but, you know, we try to be balanced and warn people nicely. But yeah, it's really hard to and I actually wasn't sure 2 years ago if I wanted to even say anything to anybody about Vincent. But then I felt so many people saw him raging in public, and I felt like people were probably more understanding if they knew why. And after I did share around, it was definitely beneficial. People were supportive. I don't think I had anybody say anything negative at all. You know, I thought I'd be judged for him on medication. But like, you know, for my story, he was pretty sick when we decided to put him on it. And, but there was no judging. I mean, it was all, I mean, if people judged it, didn't me, but it was all supportive. So I do want to tell people, don't be afraid to reach out to your friends when you have something going on in your life, because you can't do it alone. I mean, you can't, it's too hard. And you need someone to talk to. I could just deal with this all day long and not have like someone outside of my house to talk. And I lost everything. I couldn't work anymore. And I still can't. It's just too hard with the whole issues. And I put my priorities or places. And I realized just being a caretaker is the most important. And it's hard with this illness because it waxes and wanes. He'll be great for months, and then all of a sudden it'll be difficult again. But for the most part, this past year or two, he's been good. There's some physical issues, but there's no comparison at all. I mean, we couldn't leave the house. I mean, it was bad. I think some people even my mom visited me from Connecticut, and she, we talked, didn't know until she came out here. She's like, I had no idea what you were dealing with until I saw it. It was like he would slip out of his mind. He would get stuck and slip out of his mind. And like I said, he doesn't remember any of that stuff, which is great. But I don't know. It's like, where did he go?
Right.
But and he's not alone. I mean, there's 11,000 people in the support group, and there's probably a lot more out there that have no clue. And us.
I'm just at the point where, how did in both of your situations, Beth too, how did you ladies find the courage to demand answers, to demand, no, look, I'm not nuts, there's something not right here? When you've got medical professionals that are supposed to care for you, that are supposed to be all-knowing, that you're supposed to rely on, like, I get the chills. Where did that come from, guys?
Well, I know because of the other people in the group. The group is amazing. The admins that have been there a long time wrote these files, and they have a recovery file, and I followed it to a T. And it was 40 pages. It had everything he was going through, dilated pupils, like the chemical sensitivities. I noticed my husband's like, oh my gosh, he acts crazy when you give him juice. Like it was spot on. And so that's when I knew, that the doctors had no clue. It wasn't that they just don't know. They have no idea. Mm-hmm. And you could say something's rare, but Facebook has given us a way for all these rare people to communicate. And if you watch one of the speeches, my friend Anna's husband spoke at the FDA meeting, and he said, you deny, we're the tail end of a bell-shaped curve. You cannot say we exist. And that's what's happening here. We're not all one size fits all. We all have different genes, different gene variations. Obviously Beth couldn't metabolize that medication properly. It's similar to my son. He when we did pharmacogenetic testing, turns out he can't metabolize most medications. And it turns toxic in his body. And in this case, it went to toxicity, went into his brain and weakened his blood-brain barrier. And that's why that infection got in there. I think that's I'm no science doctor, but just seeing what's happened to other children and people like, that's kind of what happens. So,
yeah, for me, I just, part of it was just a gut instinct that something is not right here. Part of it was that I kept asking the neurologist questions, and the neurologist didn't want to have conversations. That everything was, don't trust medical marijuana. Because medical marijuana, it's the only thing that was making it so I wouldn't have seizures.
That's awesome.
And so he had told me no, don't do that. It's untested. It's unproven. You need to just trust medicine. And it was so frustrating because I'm like, okay, but it works. It actually works. And so, I would eat one edible and then in the next, and then I wouldn't have a seizure for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And
awesome.
Yeah. And it was honestly, it was just I would be going from having seizures at dozens of times a day to
That's
nothing.
Horrible.
Just off of one gummy. And so, and so he told me not to trust medical marijuana. And I was like, okay, red flag right there. And then the other thing is that I had said to him, okay, my MRI says that I have hippocampal asymmetry. And so I'm the kind of person where I don't just like take whatever answers come to me. Like I go and I read the studies on it. And so I read all of the studies that I could find, which there's only like 2 studies. There are 2 studies on hippocampal asymmetry. And one was on senior citizens that, they're like age 70 plus. And they are, it's seen in people that have dementia. Like that's who this condition is seen in. The other group of people that this condition is seen in are veterans with PTSD. And I had been diagnosed with PTSD over a year before, and my neurologist didn't want to have any conversation about it. And he just said, you were probably born with a asymmetrical hippocampus. I was like, you're not listening to me. And so anytime like a doctor is very clearly just like, listen to me, you dumb little girl. That's when I'm like, okay, you don't know what you're talking about. And so that's when I was like, all right, nobody in the traditional medical field is listening to me. Who will listen to me? And so that's when I went to a naturopath from the networking group that I had been in for a year or so. And yeah, very first appointment, side effect is seizures. So.
Wow.
I'm glad you found someone to help you. I would say that is a takeaway too. That's the hardest part of thing similar to this is finding the right care.
Yeah.
I still struggle. I've had people with bits and pieces of his issues, but he's got a lot going on. I don't have somebody that can manage it. I'm managing, that sees a whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
And even talk the singular piece. No one will talk about the singular piece with me. His neurologist talked to me about the infection piece because that's what she deals with, but she does not, she'll listen, but they ignore it. They ignore this happened to him, and it did. And it was his trigger, and he was fine before he took it. And it was what caused a lot of this. And people ignore it because they don't know what to do with it. They just know what they know, right?
And it contradicts other beliefs because, you see these people who these medications are helping. And so it can't possibly be causing damage to you if it's helping other people. And then the fear comes up. This is something I had mentioned to you guys before we went live. When I was pregnant with my kids, I had hyperemesis gravidarum. And so, with my daughter, I vomited over 1,000 times. With my son, I lost 12 pounds in 12 days and had an IV pulled 10 hours a day for 4 months. Yeah. And so I had Zofran pumping into me 24 hours a day with my son the whole pregnancy. And right after my pregnancy, there was all of the discussion about like, can Zofran actually cause more damage than it helps? And so for me, like that, it makes me angry because these people, their lawsuit was let's get Zofran just taken away completely. And
I took Zofran too. I was vomiting like that too. It was awful. I didn't have as bad as you with the IV, but it helped. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so like there's these people who they feel that Zofran is the reason that their baby was born without a kidney or with other issues. But for me, it's like, okay, my child, I don't know, maybe my child's like learning disorder has something to do with Zofran, but my baby's here. And you can't take away this medication when this medication saves lives. And so it's like, we can't even have these conversations about what to do, period. Because there's so much fear around, but if you take away my medication, somebody in my family dies.
Right. No. And that's why I want to make sure that if anyone's listening that, gives this to their children, just talk to your doctor about your burns. Don't just stop giving it to them. Asthma is life-threatening. And, that's why the doctors at the round table, some of them were really adamant about not putting the black box warning on it just because of the asthma. There's medications that there's a use for. We actually had a friend in the group that his life was saved by an Lugast. But then he took it for years after and got sad and depressed. And so maybe if just that realm to save the life, instead of long-term use, might be better. But as long as you're aware of this stuff, this is the problem. It was difficult to link. It happened slowly over time.
Right.
And actually, I praised Cation for a long time. And when he was going through these hard times, the last thing I wanted was for his asthma to flare. Kept giving, I had no clue. And I think just education is a huge step. And doctors monitoring, every month, giving their patients a call. Hey, how are they doing? All that would have taken was, are there some mood swings? And I'd be like, whoa, so it doesn't take much for some of these changes to happen. And your doctors should have been aware of those seizure side effects. Like if you brought it up, they should have said, oh, it's a medication, there's, right. I mean.
Well, and that's the interesting thing as well, is that, like, as you were saying, the Lexapro, it saved my life. Zero question in my mind, 100% it saved my life. I should not have been on it as long as I was, to the point that it caused neurological damage. Yeah. So
no, same with my son. I mean, maybe if he just took it for a few months to get better, and then switch to something else, because I don't know what it did to him. Now he is so sensitive to everything. He can't medicate. Like, there's very few medication reacting to similarly. I've got to compound every single thing. And, but yeah, that's a question. I don't know what it did to him. Did it hurt his liver? I don't know. That's on my list of taking him to a liver doctor. I just don't know. So hope one else learns the hard way like this. And I don't know. I'm really looking forward to pharmacogenetics being more of a mainstream thing, where some psychiatrists do this. They do a cheek swab and they see if you can metabolize the medication they're going to prescribe and what dosages.
Good.
So I did do that for my son, and now I know what medications that are red flag. And it even helped. I did it with my daughters, and before their surgeries, it said they have post-op nausea. I told the anesthesiologist, and he gave them Zofran. It's good to have that knowledge. So you're in charge. I would say people, you need to be in charge of your own health, because no one else is going to do it for you. And you need to recognize, feel different taking something. If you're not feeling well, there are all tests available. We're not in the 1800s. You can find out about your DNA.
Right.
If you're not well, run labs. I wish I had mentioned pandas to the doctor when he first came off, and the doctor laughed at me. But then I found out he did have it. He did have the strep that attacked his brain. And if he had gotten treatment then, we would be horror of agony. But I should have went to more doctors after. I couldn't find anyone to help us. And finally, my friend reached out to me and strongly encouraged me to see this doctor. So we did. But I was at the end of doctors. I said, no more doctor. He said, really, I think she can help you. So don't be afraid to reach out to friends that are having a hard time. Try not to be pushy, but just say, hey, I know this podcast could help you, or I know this doctor could help you. Because if she hadn't done that, I don't know where we'd be either. I mean, we'd still be in a bad place.
So true. So true. Some of the things that I'm gathering is speak up, network, be with people, be in groups of people, like-minded people. I mean, the lady that you connected with, Beth, came from your networking group.
Yeah, she did. She did. And I mean, I met her because of my sister, and yeah, it's also just speaking up and saying like, hey, something's going on.
Yeah.
And because somebody has answers somewhere.
Yeah. I feel like watching for behaviors, Cami said it a couple of times. Beth, you said it a couple of times. This wasn't a normal behavior for me prior to taking this medication. I think a lot of times as parents, especially when it's our first and we don't know anything,
right?
They're misbehaving, Cami, like you had said, what is this, terrible twos? Yeah, it's terrible twos. Well, we don't know how to gauge that. I have one child. I don't know if his terrible twos are worse than another's or worse than another's, you know what I mean? But I think that really paying attention to behavior as a parent and not being kind of lazy about it, not being like, oh, well, kids are kids, and really looking at those details is where, I mean, you know your kid best, right? Better than anybody else. Like my kid better than his own father knows him. It's like, pay attention to those details, that intuition that we have that we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast when I said, hey, I think we're going to talk about intuition. I was being intuitive at the moment. But really, intuition is there for a reason, you know, and I 100% wholeheartedly trust my intuition, and I think others should as well. But also with research and with education, you know, like Cami did, and talking with other people and comparing your story and just such important stuff. Cami, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I hope this helps somebody, and it was nice to talk about it. You know, I keep it locked up in a place, and it's good. It's good to talk about it. So
awesome. Well, like you said, if this helps, if this particular, you know, this episode helps one person, then that's one person that we've helped, and that makes me happy too. Beth, anything you'd like to add?
You know, when we were talking about doing this episode, I was like, okay, so what's the angle? What's the agenda? Like, how do we make this so it doesn't sound like a fringe conspiracy theory, right? And so I'm really glad that we did have this conversation, because like, you know, as soon as I started to understand what had happened, and that like, you're the first person that I've ever talked to who, you know, your son had reactions like I had to my medication. And so I thought like, okay, I'm just like me and these random people in this Lexapro group. We're just random weirdos, I guess, you know? But seeing that like, yeah, this actually is happening to a lot more people. It makes it so much easier to be able to speak up about my own story. So thank you for sharing yours, because I believe that, you know, when we share stories, when we sell the things that we sell, when we do the things that we do to speak on bigger platforms, we're actually able to save lives. And so I love that you do have the courage to share this story, even though somebody's gut reaction might be like, okay, this is a crazy fringe conspiracy theory kind of lady, right?
Yeah. And I try not to be like that, you know, and I know it doesn't happen to everybody. And, you know, when looking back, it's easy to have that guilt, that mom guilt. Like I gave it to him and I didn't know, and I didn't look on the internet, and I trusted my doctor, and that's what a lot of people do. And get rid of that guilt, because it wasn't your fault. It wasn't my fault. And no one warned me. I had no clue. And hopefully now when people pick up that prescription, the pharmacist will ask them, it's on the box, you know, you'll see it right there. And the doctor will discuss it with them before. And hopefully something happens with Lexapro too, where there's more warnings given throughout the use too, or maybe it's just more, like you said, short-term use to get someone out of that black hole, you know? Yeah. So.
Absolutely. Awesome.
All right, ladies. Well, it's been a wonderful episode. Again, Cami, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I truly do think that this will save a life, Beth. I truly do. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.